Welcome to High Vibes with your host, Bill G. At High Vibes, we're looking into what it means to be a fourth dimensional being in an ever-changing world. We hope that by listening to our podcast, you can feel a greater sense of peace and connection as we collectively raise our energetic vibration to the next level. And now for today's podcast. Hello and welcome to High Vibes. I'm your host, Bill G, and today's special guest is Deni Van. Deni is the creator of Heartfelt Awakening LLC, which is a multimedia company providing resources, methods, tools, products, trainings, and services focused on personal spiritual wellness. She was a guest speaker over at the American Society of Dowsers National Convention last June, and her organization exists to arm people with techniques, tools, trainings, and methods to begin using and seeing measurable results in their daily lives. She has courses, events, programs, especially designed for people who identify themselves as intuitives, mystics, light workers, heartfelt-centered leaders, soul-led conscious creators, future intentional thought leaders, and those with an authentic awakening heart with a desire to impact humanity for the better. Her website is heartfeltawakening.com, and she also has a YouTube channel called Heartfelt Awakening. And so, Deni, welcome to the show.
Hey, Bill, it's really good to see you again. Thank you for having me. That was such a wonderful introduction. I'm like, well, oh my gosh, my website says I do all that.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So this is something I ask a lot of people on the show because I find that the journey that leads us to a heartfelt awakening or living in a higher vibration is usually comes from a place of healing of the self, because our journey is usually fraught with these catalyst moments, or like I like to call piano moments, where the piano falls on your head and you have no choice at that point but to do an awakening moment to get to where you need to be. So I'm interested to know what your journey was, how you got from wherever you were to where you are right now with this multimedia company.
Yes. So I think a big turning point for me was in 2001. I was 35 years old and had two little kids, age 6 and 12. And I was diagnosed with a fast-spreading form of cancer. And I said no to chemotherapy and radiation, the traditional of, I hadn't decided, they hadn't decided if I was going to get chemo with my radiation. So I just said, no, none of that. No to the being injected with radioactive dye to determine which lymph nodes to remove and all of that. And I said, no. It's like, well, you don't do this, you will be dead in 2 years. So it was definitely a transformational moment. It's like, all right, well, let's see, 2 years, my kids will be 8 and 14. What am I going to do? So you pray. What else are you going to do? Your mind starts going crazy. And I started to follow the mind a little bit, especially when I told other people, it's like, oh yeah, I'm dealing with cancer. And they would literally take me down. So I decided, you know what, I got to keep this between me and God. And it's this body that needs to heal. And it was through this whole process of learning how this body works and it's like, oh my gosh, I was a walking head. I was completely numb from the neck down. I had no idea what was going on in my body. But if you looked at me from the outside, I was at the top of my career, being a professional linguist specializing in nonverbal communication. I had contracts with Fortune 500 companies in 2001. So I was flying in my career. I was one of a handful of people nationally certified with what I do. And so it's like, you look back, it's like, all right, well, is this fate? I mean, am I going to be dead in 2 years, or do I have to go through this horrific process? I mean, what am I going to do? and really just taking you talk about high vibes. I really had to fight to get to that point of being okay with dying. I had to literally say, all right, it's like, all right, I'm going to be dead in 2 years. What am I going to do in the meantime? So in the meantime, I found a surgeon who would just remove the tumor, and he referred me to an oncologist who was willing to work with me. So she's like, honey, you got to do something. So I wrote out this whole list of things. And one of the first things I learned is Reiki, along with how to use a pendulum. So those were the first two tools that I received on my journey of discovering this healing process. It's like, all right, well, I'm either going to be dead in 2 years, or, I'm going to fight this without that, which my body just adamantly was appalled even thinking about, now that I listen to my body. But at that point, I really had to learn to listen. And so Reiki and using a pendulum were really transformational for me. And I learned how we're only conscious of a minute amount. Right now I'm conscious of you in my office on a screen, two-dimensionally, and I'm only limited to so much that's conscious. And yet unconsciously, there is so much happening, and it drives our behaviors, it drives our emotions, it drives our reactions to our three-dimensional world. And yet there's a part of us, and I connected with that part of us when the doctor's going on and on about, how he's going to inject me with radioactive yada, 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 yada. There was that voice inside that said, that's not for you. And it took everything in my being to listen to that, because the whole world was showing me something else. And so I had to learn, oh my gosh, there's this vibration everywhere in my body, and learning in my journey of being trained with craniosacral therapy and somatic release, and how the nervous system has all the memories. And I experienced this human experience trauma between the ages of 4 and 16. And so there was a lot of that stuff that was yet to be processed. It was mostly suppressed, which is what we're taught to do, right? Just sweep it under the rug. Shh, don't talk about it. Take these meds. Drink this coffee. Do this, do that, do anything other than deal with what's coming up. Just push it right back down. So I learned that the linguistic process of pretty much any language, and then body language, once I connected to this nervous system, my nervous system, all bodies started talking to me. So I became a licensed massage therapist. I went through craniosacral therapy, where learning the rhythms of the body communicates on a cellular level, and it vibrates at these magnificent healing frequencies if we can only plug into them. And so as a musician, you bring up vibration. I realize this body is no different than tuning a guitar. So once I realized these energy centers within the body, and you can tune into them vibrationally through sound, through music, through vibration. I like to use a pitch pipe. So these are things that I learned from myself, from the inside out. And what I noticed a lot of us do is we keep looking outside. We'll look over there, and oh, maybe the pendulum has the answer for me. We'll look over there. We'll look over there. We'll look over, like Jesus said, everybody's saying, hey, we got the truth. No, we got the truth. No, the truth is over here. And what we're not seeing is that we already have it. I couldn't see it because it was buried. So I had to uncover it as I went, layer by layer, using, the pendulum to communicate with this part of me, this subconscious, though some are now calling it the superconscious. Some refer to this part of us as the superconscious. What I discovered through communicating, I use 4 responses from this. It's a yes, no, a maybe, and a polarized. And so learning to communicate with nervous systems, I just discovered this way to teach this part of us, which there's only one, how to do the integration work. And so I started on myself with tapping. And so now I use the pendulum when working with others who want to stop running from their past and integrate this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that happens in the unconscious that we can integrate within us to stop this dividing, to make the unconscious conscious, right? This is how we make what's in the unconscious conscious, by integrating its knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And the beauty is, like the University of Arizona, the Center of Conscious Studies, they're all trying to even agree on what this is. And they're all learning that it has capacity beyond our expectations. It's beyond anything we ever dreamed it could do. And I see, as an NLP practitioner and hypnotist as well, I see what marketing does with hypnotizing and using language to draw us in, to draw our attention in and begin to feed that, rather than be with what we already have and be with what we already are. We're trying to compare, and I see this being used in three-dimensional environments.
Okay, you hit on a few points, and I want to circle back around on. One thing is, the pendulum. You're talking through the subconscious, because I use the pendulum too in my practice. I do what I call Akashic dowsing, but really what it is the self talking to the self. It's you're allowing the pendulum to act as the conduit to speaking to your own subconscious. And the beauty of it is the answers are all around you. You just have to look for them. Just like with water dowsing, the water is all around. You just use your pendulum or use your L rods or whatever and find it, because it's there waiting for you. Just ask the right question and you'll get to the right answer. And I
I
find that
found one of the most beautiful questions to ask, especially, just connecting to the pendulum, which is to your energy, right? Is asking permission to connect on a subconscious level.
right.
And so there's downloads and exchange of energy automatically. It's happening right now. It's telling me a big fat yes.
Mhm.
And so with that, and I can feel this movement of energy throughout this whole part of me, where I'm getting the tingling. And sometimes when it's no and heavy, I was working with somebody who was working with issues that were coming up, and we don't tell the story of the issues with the process that we use. What we do is because that's subjective, right? So if somebody's having an issue and it's really, really bad, I don't know how bad it is, but to them it's really, really bad. But again, I don't know how bad it is. So when we switch making the subjective objective, I'm having this issue and it's 9 on the pain scale, 0 to 10, 10 being the worst. It's 9 on the pain scale. Oh my gosh. Okay. So let's, now we have an objective place to start. But in that process, we create the space between I am this problem to I'm at a 9 with this problem. So you create a little bit of space. And within that space, you get more communication, you get more clarity before moving forward. And so with learning how to use this and communicate with this, it's been a phenomenal journey.
The cancer thing also has me very interested, because I'm working with somebody right now who is actually going into surgery in a couple of days. And she had and it's a superficial tumor that they biopsied it, and it's cancer and whatever. And she spoke to 3 different surgeons, and they gave her 3 different answers about how they were going to proceed. And the first one was the most radical, and like, oh no, we're going to take half your breast away, and we're going to open you up and grab that sentinel node. And then then the other one was actually, the second one was even worse. And it was like, oh no, we're just gonna keep cutting and cutting and cutting until we know we've got it all. And then the third one was like, no, this one's right on the surface. We don't have to do nothing. We could just take that out, and and no no radiation, no none. We'll take the sentinel node, but that's fine. But that's just for staging. We'll know it from that point. You'll be in and out, no problem. And so all through this process, she was having these body reactions to the conversations, and it was her higher self saying, no, 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 hell no, no. and she's also using acupuncture. She's using energy healing, and she's actually working with one of our other partners with Vital Bioenergetics. Her name's Maureen, and she does a form of distance healing, which is extraordinarily powerful, and I recommend it highly. She's worked on me as well, so it's a fascinating journey, and through this journey, it's a journey of self-discovery. She's learning so much about herself. She's learning so much about her what she's purifying, and now she's at a point where no worries, and she's gonna get through this. It's gonna be fine, and it's just a minor. And in fact, it's not only just not a minor bump in the road. It is transformative in that she's learning how to listen to her body and no longer fear her body, because she feared her body before. Now she no longer fears her body anymore, which is a wonderful place to be. And sometimes it does take the proverbial piano falling on your head. But I was kind of joking with her the other day. It was like, well, it turns out it wasn't a piano, it was just an accordion. So it's not taking her out, but it's definitely it still hurts, but it's not as bad as everyone was making it out to be in the very beginning. And that's part of that journey, and part of that healing journey is understanding that even if you're given a diagnosis, which is devastating, which would turn everyone you tells you, oh my God, that's the worst thing in the world. You need to get the radical stuff. You're going to be dying for the rest of your life. And so you don't want to tell anybody.
Yeah,
And so,
telling the worst thing you can do.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
The first thing you feel is they feel relieved that it's not them.
or what I found is that people start to process their unprocessed grief for other people who have gone through this.
Yes, I get projectile vomited on all the time. Yeah.
Right. Right, exactly. Yeah. And so
Yeah. And I love that you said the bump in the road. It's really perspective, because, I can look back and say, okay, well, that could have been a stumbling block. But if I look back and really analyze, it was really a stepping stone, because it brought me up to so much awareness, so much realization, so much connection to more than just this, because the human's very limited. It's the being that is unlimited. And so getting into a attunement, I guess, vibrational frequency, in tune, like when you have two chords that come together and it just sounds so beautifully. That's what it feels like when I'm really connected with my being, the unlimited, expansive, knowing part of each and every one of us. That's one. Even though there are billions of humans on the planet, there's only one being.
and that got me thinking about something else about the purification process, is that when you mentioned super consciousness, this is something I'm wrapping my brain around more and more, because we like to think of ourselves as a mind-body connection, the mind-body person in 3 dimensions, and we're not that at all. We are simply just meat sacks of a larger consciousness. And if the larger consciousness is going through an awakening process, then we are all part of that awakening process. And so anything that needs to be purified, anything that needs to be cleared within that purification process becomes part of the larger macrocosmic collective consciousness purification process. I don't know if I'm making myself very, very clear here, but it's
We're all drinking the water.
we're all drinking. Yeah, we're all drinking the water. It's just like
We're all drinking the water.
right,
Yeah.
right. And
And you talk about the mind body. The mind body is a construct. Most of it is programmed. So when you start to shift from the human to the being, you start to see the mechanisms of these constructs. And that's why it's really important to keep things inside and not actually let the word go out until you're ready for the word to go out so that it can come back fulfilled. And so becoming more and more mindful of how I speak and in how I'm speaking for another person, because that's my job. I really have to think about how this person is, their body language, their meaning, their intention. All of that has to be included within the interpretation from a nonverbal language to a verbal language.
because words have vibration, words and you take a
Their
word,
spells.
yeah, like
Mhm.
you take a word like cancer. There's so much negativity attached to that word, so much fear attached to that word. To even say the word out loud, it automatically causes a closing up of the body. It causes a,
Depending on your programming.
depending
Now,
on your
I
program, right?
reprogrammed myself for when I hear cancer inside. Like if somebody says, "Oh, I have cancer inside," I say, "Bless you."
Mm-hmm.
Because if I go, "Oh my gosh, she's got cancer," what's that going to do inside me? It's definitely not going to bless me. It's going to
And
fulfill that fear reaction.
Robert Detzler, who wrote the spiritual response therapy charts, goes a step further and says that when you have taken that idea of cancer and said, I have cancer, and associate all the fear and all of the fatalism that goes along with that, you are actually giving energy and creating the cancer. You are actually feeding the cancer with energy and giving it a better chance to metastasize and do something terrible to you, because you're feeding it with your fear, because fear is a creative power and lack is a creative power. All these negative emotions are creative power. But what's really cool is love actually has a far, far greater creative power than all those negative things combined. It just depends on how much you're paying attention to those creative things as opposed to those non-creative things.
Absolutely. And the fear can be learned behavior. So if you see your parents react a certain way to certain things, you start to react a certain way. You see your friends at school react a certain way to certain, oh, COVID, everybody's afraid of COVID. That means I got to be afraid of COVID. So a lot of this is a construct of the false self. So we learn this through ritual, patterns, and behaviors. We're programmed. So these patterns, rituals, and behaviors can all be reprogrammed, but it cannot be reprogrammed from the place where it is programmed from. So we cannot reprogram from the mind or the unconscious, the conscious or the unconscious. Therefore, I wrote an abstract and it was accepted. Therefore, the subconscious has a separate language process than the conscious and unconscious thought. So it has to happen there. It won't happen in the conscious and unconscious realm where the problem is. I had to question everything. Is this right for me? Ask the pendulum. What is my body saying? Is this right for me? Is this what I should be doing? Is this the path I need to go down? And if there's alignment, when your frequency and vibration is in alignment, it's a hell yes. There's no talking me out of it. There's no trying to convince me to go for chemotherapy and radiation. I'm like, nope, nope, I'm good. Even if I was to die in 2 years,
Because you were okay,
I had to be okay with it.
right? So let's talk a little bit about your YouTube channel and podcast and all the stuff that you're doing with your thing, because I want to make sure you get a chance to talk about that in case any of our listeners are interested in that.
Would love to. Yeah, we're Heartfelt Awakening, and it's for awakening hearts. I love to work with mystics and people who connect with this energy. They're very sensitive, empathic, and they're everywhere. It's like, and so many of us, we just don't know what to do with this. What the heck is going on? And so I've created a four-step process in it. We have over 7,000 students worldwide that are incorporating this into their lives and getting measurable results. And here's the thing is you don't have to retell your story, like going to therapy. The therapist wants to know, where did this all start? And so you have to tell the story again. Your whole nervous system is in that mode again, thinking it's happening again, because it doesn't know. It's a child. It doesn't know. It depends on what you're feeding it and what you're feeling. That's how it responds. So you're telling your story over and over again and getting triggered over and over again. So what we do is we have a four-step process and teaching the subconscious how to do the integration work. And it's fascinating because it can see what we're focused in on, what we're consciously aware of. Okay, I'm having anxiety and it's a 7.5, maybe 8. Okay, maybe it's an 8. All right, 7.5. I'm having anxiety and I'm focused in on that 7.5. So you're consciously aware you're having anxiety. It's a 7.5. What's going on below the decks in the unconscious that the subconscious can see? All of these parts, unconscious parts, are lighting up that are related to this anxiety that's happening, right? It sees it in perfect order and perfect sequence, like a language sentence. It has a beginning, a middle, an end, and a period. And so it sees it in perfect order and perfect sequence. But how do you communicate with this subconscious? It communicates through allegory. So you tell it a story. Imagine you're playing on the field. It's like a soccer field, the football field of life, and you're running and you're going for the goal. But as you're running, you're stepping in these holes everywhere on the field. You can see the lines, the boundaries. You can see where you need to go. You can see where the spectators are. You see it in this moment, but you're stepping in these. And yet all of these little holes in the playing field are in perfect order and perfect sequence, and filling them in like a feather, one at a time, in perfect order and perfect sequence, where we can barely feel that the integration of all of the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of each and every one of those holes in the playing field is being integrated into the wholeness that you are, and this magnificence that you are, this super conscious. It's reprocessing, reprogramming, letting go what no longer serves. And people have told me, they're like, it's kind of like peeing in the ocean. Yes, once you pee in the ocean, you can't get it back. So it's kind of like that feeling of shifting. It's like, so now they're like, okay, it was a 7.5, but it's moving now. It's moving. I can't really tell. Maybe it's a 5, maybe it's a 4. So that's when integration is happening. But there's a caveat. All of the parts in the unconscious, all of them must agree to the integration work. And so that's where NLP, and I use a waking state form of hypnosis. So they don't have to go into trance, or if they're afraid of hypnosis, oh my God, it's the devil. They don't have to worry about that because they're awake and aware the whole time. So I use a waking state type of hypnosis to get all of the parts in the unconscious. And that's where the pendulum comes in. It tells me if there are any parts that do not agree, because there may be parts that are tiny little parts that might think it feels like they're dying to them or nobody's going to listen to them. So we want to honor and respect every single one of those parts, asking them to integrate all of their knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So that's where we work with this to let us know what's going on in that process so that integration can happen. No more suppressing.
Do something quite similar to with the Akashic dowsing, because again, when you're talking about trauma and you have somebody telling their story, their trauma story, all you're doing is reinforcing the trauma every time you tell the story.
You're digging it deeper. The grooves are going deeper.
You're digging so what the pendulum does, or what the dowsing does, is it tells the story of what's happening in the now moment. It tells it in the form of an allegory rather than telling it in the form of, my mother did this to me in this event and whatever. It's telling the story, but from a different point of view, from your subconscious's point of view. Like, the soccer field is the, but in with the charts that I use, allegories that are generated from the law of one, from Chinese cosmology, and whatever I'm, picking from. You can put it into conscious awareness where you can agree to let it go. It doesn't have the same sucker punch that the trauma had. And then you realize that, oh, this is just a story, especially when you're going into multiple lifetimes. It's like, oh, wait a second, I've done this story over and over and over.
And every single one of those parts or personalities, if you will, trauma personalities, their goal is for your survival.
Yes.
And they have knowledge, wisdom, and understanding that can be integrated rather than kept separate from the wholeness of you. So if you keep it separate from the wholeness of you, you keep a button that somebody can push. It's a trigger. So once it agrees to share all of its knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, then the whole team knows what's going on. And there's still the memory, but there's no more the trigger. You're not reacting all over the place. You're not projectile vomiting on everyone. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be like, I know what it's like to go through trauma. 4 years old is what I witnessed. It's like, but now when I see that and I feel it in my body, there's a feeling of gratitude rather than reaction.
And you're getting there when the trigger no longer triggers. And it's not to say that other stuff won't come up too.
There
Because,
may be littler buttons that might be
yep.
related, yeah, but we do an anchoring so that those are continually worked on even long after the session.
So,
Because it's a never-ending process, right? We're constantly peeling that onion.
oh God.
It's like, does this ever end?
Yes, and I keep at when a client sees me for the first time, they're like, "Okay, how many sessions?" I'm like,
How
"How
many
many do you want?"
sessions till you fix me? You're right. Yeah, right.
Yes, there is no, and I say, once you start a purification process, when you start a healing process, it really never ends, because the process of soul purification is it's an ongoing process, because every time you think you may have got something licked, you're going to discover that there are deeper and deeper stuff for you to work on. And some of that is raising your vibration to a much higher level, so that way you can deal with bigger problems, or you can deal with bigger stuff, and you can handle stuff that you never were able to handle before. I mean, I give myself as a great example of this. 5 years ago, I was miserable in the corporate world, doing work, and I was very, very unhappy. And I swore I'd never do that stuff again. But then after the last 3-4 years, I've been really, really working on my stuff. And then recently, I got a promotion at my job as a tax preparer. I'm now a branch manager, and I would have never taken a job like that before. And I have to admit, I was scared of taking on that level of responsibility, because I never wanted to have that kind of responsibility before again. And now I realized, once I got into it, I was like, wow, I'm having the time of my life. I'm really, really enjoying doing this. And nothing's changed. The triggers haven't changed. I've changed. I'm now more together. I'm more in my body than I ever was before. And so this is good. This is healing. Am I done? Heck no. Bring it on.
Right? The body's constantly changing. The body's never the same. And so, I just turned 57, and it's been 22 years since I was told I'd be dead in 2 years. And so observing the body and listening and recognizing when it needs rest, when it's okay to, keep going until the project's done, and then it's done, then you can rest. And like, I like to take on contracts. We talked about this a little bit. I'm in 4 of 41 weeks of a 41-week contract. So, having those things so that I know I'm able to take care of myself, because that really is priority. Because if I don't take care of myself, nobody will. But again, this body is here temporarily. I'm very lucky that I got more than 2 years past 2001. I'm so grateful, to have that, 22 years since. It's like, whoa, it's been a ride. But also the shift in transformation of how I connect, because remember, I was a talking head. I mean, I was in my head so much, and I was disconnected from the neck down from this body. I had no idea I was in pain until I saw the massage therapist, and she touched me, and I'm like, oh my God. She's like, you're in a lot of pain. I was like, I didn't even realize how much pain I was in. So really connecting with that is what creates those high vibes.
Awesome.
You want to create those high vibes whenever possible.
So, can you let everybody know where to find you?
Most social media, Heartfelt Awakening. Heartfelt Awakening pretty much everywhere, I think, except TikTok.
No.
I have another channel where it's in American Sign Language, so that's Divine Gestures, but that one's on TikTok. That one we put on TikTok.
Okay. Cool.
But
Well,
yeah, it's the same message, just in
visual.
a different language. Yeah, yep, exactly. People who use a visual language to communicate and need to feed their spiritual being as well.
Fantastic. Well, Deni, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for
Yeah, I wish we had more time to chat when we were roommates at the conference
Oh
with
yeah.
our specialties. It's like, you were so busy. That was so awesome. That
Oh
was so awesome. It was great meeting you there.
yeah. It was like a revolving door, which is great. I mean, I did very, very well there, and I love doing that work, and can't wait to do it
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So, and thank you everybody out there for listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you for listening. For more information about Bill and Nina G, please go to www.vitalbioenergetics.com. See you next time.